If you were to ask 100 people what makes a relationship great, you probably get 100 different answers. Same thing if you asked them what causes relationships to fail, maybe another 100 different answers. And in fact, what makes relationship work difficult is so much of it is specific and unique to the couple, and what doesn't work for their relationship. But in over a decade working with couples, I have noticed 5 key habits that the majority of successful couples have, and that's what we're going to talk about today on RelationShots. Hey, welcome to RelationShots. If it's your first time hanging out with us and you've not yet downloaded your free guide to intimacy, you'll see a link in the description area below. Grab that. It'll help you evaluate 4 key areas of intimacy in your marriage and give you some ideas on how you can improve the connection in those areas. If communication's your struggle, I'm currently doing a live communication masterclass. You'll see a link for that. That is free. If you want to join me for an hour and improve and strengthen your communication in your marriage, check that out. You can register. I'm doing them weekly, so you should have no problem getting in and finding that. All right, so let's jump in. As I've worked with couples for more than a decade, I've noticed that if you want a strong, thriving, healthy relationship, generally I am seeing 5 habits over and over and over again in couples who are building strong, healthy relationships. And I want to quickly review those 5 things. I've done extensive videos probably on each one of these at different times over the past few years. But I want to highlight 5 habits of successful couples. Habit number 1 is boundaries. They have healthy boundaries. Listen, you cannot have a healthy relationship without healthy boundaries. And when I say boundaries, I'm talking about 2 types of boundaries. We have both what I would call outside boundaries, boundaries that are protecting the relationship in general, and inside boundaries, boundaries that help us know within our marriage what we're responsible for and what our spouse is responsible for. So what I see with a lot of couples who do not have healthy relationships is they have a lack of boundaries outside protecting the relationship. So that may be boundaries with family and in-laws, that may be boundaries with friends, that may be boundaries with opposite sex friends or coworkers. And without clear boundaries and holding clear boundaries, you leave your marriage exposed to outside influence, outside damage. And so couples need to have strong boundaries about what they do and don't allow to impact their relationship if they want to protect their marriage. And then inside the marriage, there needs to be clarity on what you own and what your spouse owns. And a lot of couples that get imbalanced and get unhealthy, it's because they have not set healthy boundaries within the relationship, spouse to spouse. And so what that looks like is a healthy boundary means I take ownership and responsibility for my emotions and my actions, and I do not try to take responsibility for my spouse's emotions and actions. And a lot of times we try to control, we try to manipulate, we try to actually cross a boundary and say, you know what, I don't like what's happening in my spouse, and so I'm going to take ownership and try to mold. And that's not. There's a boundary line, and I'm going to own my emotions and my actions and be sensitive to how they impact you, but I expect my spouse to do the same thing back. And so if I'm either unwilling to have a healthy boundary and take ownership of my own emotions and my own actions, I'm going to damage the relationship. Or if I attempt to step over the line and take control of my spouse's emotions and actions instead of holding them accountable to do that themselves, that's a lack of boundaries, and that tends to create an imbalance in a relationship. So healthy couples have healthy boundaries, and they set those both outside to protect the relationship and inside so that there's clear delineation of what my spouse owns and what I own in the relationship. A second habit that successful couples have is the presence of community. And so I've done entire videos on this. I do believe what I always say is my number 1 key to thriving marriages is the presence of community, because I think this is a group project. I think we were not meant to do it alone, and many of the couples I see struggling are couples who are isolated. And so community provides a number of different things for couples, things like accountability. You don't want to be your spouse's only accountability partner. You need sometimes some outside leverage to call them into account. That's called community. There are times when you need encouragement, when you need somebody else to have more hope for you in your marriage than you have in the present moment, and you need that outside encouragement because for whatever reason, the season you're in, your spouse is not encouraging you a whole lot. I think you also need support. And while we want to support each other inside the marriage, there are times we need more support than our spouse can give us. And there's times where our spouse is just not supporting us in the way we feel like we need. And we need to have outside community and friendships who can come in and support us. And so community is one of those things that successful couples have other couples around them who are also fighting for their marriages and are also trying to build happy, thriving marriages, because you see the opposite true, which is divorce is also contagious. So while healthy marriages and that kind of community is contagious, when you see groups of couples where one or two starts getting a divorce, that actually becomes contagious as well. So healthy couples have good community around them. A third habit that healthy couples have is intentionality. And again, I've done probably quite a few videos over the last 4 or 5 years around intentionality, but I believe that intentionality is much more important than chemistry. We tend to focus in movies and in books and romance novels and TV. We focus on chemistry. We want to have passion. And I'm not against chemistry, but I also know that chemistry does not keep a relationship going. Intentionality does. And when I say intentionality, we got to be intentional to make sure the things that we know that cause our marriage to grow and the things we know that fight against our marriage growing, we've got to be intentional to make sure that we are feeding and that we are also weeding our marriages of those things. We got to be intentional about time together where we have date nights. We got to be intentional about time together where we're having hard conversations. And so around communication, I believe there's got to be great intentionality. If we have 3 categories of kind of conversations or types of conversations, I would say we have calendar conversations, logistics, who's doing what. We have connection conversations, that's building emotional intimacy, building friendship. That's what the dating process was focused on. And then we have correction conversations, and those are the ones where we're problem solving, we're dealing with issues in our relationship individually together. And so if we're not intentional about making sure we have specific time to connect and build intimacy, specific time to have difficult conversations, specific time to have calendar conversations, all that stuff flows together, gets muddled together. Next thing you know, we feel like roommates, we don't feel like soulmates. And so a lack of intentionality is where I see many couples growing apart and ultimately end up deciding this marriage is not for me because we've, quote, fallen out of love. What you've fallen out of is you have a lack of intentionality that has prevented you from continuing to do the right things to make that marriage thrive and grow. A fourth category or habit of successful couples is what I call personal responsibility. And that just means that we all have stuff personally that we need to be intentional about managing so that it doesn't spill over and negatively impact our relationship. I believe we have a relational responsibility. That means I need to know how my wife feels loved, how she feels cared for, how she feels safe, and I need to prioritize those things. I also have a personal responsibility to her in the marriage, which is I need to work on my own junk. Maybe it's past trauma, maybe it's past relationship baggage, maybe it's family of origin issues, maybe it's wounds from other relationships. But I have a personal responsibility that I need to deal with those things, pursue growth, pursue healing so that my spouse gets the best part of me inside the marriage. And so couples who are building successful, thriving marriages are couples where both individual is fully committed individually to becoming the best them, right? And I'm not talking about this weird self-actualization, you gotta self-love, do you? I'm just talking about we gotta work out some of the stuff. We all got stuff. And it is not fair to my spouse for me to choose not to deal with my stuff, and it continues to disrupt our relationship. It continues to prevent me from relating to her in a healthy way. That's not good for the marriage. So couples who are successful are couples where both individuals are committed to continuing personal growth and continuing to do the work of healing and dealing with past trauma and wounds so that we can have the best relationship possible. And a fifth habit that successful couples have is interdependence. That is, so some, if you look at the two ends of the spectrum, this side is independence, this side is complete codependence, and somewhere in the middle on the spectrum is interdependence. What's happened for a lot of couples is, again, this goes back to habit number 4, which is personal responsibility, dealing with my stuff. If I haven't dealt with my past stuff, whatever maybe kind of relationship I've been in that's been unhealthy will cause me to swing my pendulum to the other side. So if I was in a relationship where the other person tried to control me, tried to prevent me from having individuality and freedom in the relationship, I may make a vow to myself in the next relationship, I'm not going to be dependent at all. I'm going to be completely independent, because I'm never going to find myself in that situation again. Or maybe you are unhealthy, and so you tend to lean towards codependence, and that didn't serve you well. So you're like, instead of being codependent, I'm going to be independent. And I think there's something healthy in the middle called interdependence, because love requires both limits and freedom. I need some freedom, but not unbridled, unchecked, whatever I want to do freedom. There's also limits, that love has healthy limits in a relationship. And so we've got to have the ability to not only depend on one another for things, that's good and that's healthy when done in a healthy way, but also have some level of independence and individuality, so that I am also a person existing outside of my relationship. Some people, their whole identity and how they're defined becomes solely that relationship. And the problem is, when you start finding your identity and your significance and your purpose inside a relationship or tied to that relationship, if that relationship ever were to fail, you don't just lose the relationship, you lose your significance, your identity, your purpose. And so healthy couples, one of their habits is interdependence, which is, I am choosing to depend on you for certain things relationally, which is why I chose to be in a relationship with you. I'm not outsourcing those things, because that is supposed to be kept between husband and wife. So I'm depending on you for certain levels of intimacy, emotional, intellectual, certainly physical, spiritual, inside the relationship. But I also have a level of independence where I have other friendships that also fill me up in areas, so that I'm not putting the weight of everything I need relationally on my spouse's shoulders, which would be an unhealthy burden. I also have other healthy places that I'm getting some of my not as deep emotional needs, intellectual needs, recreational, friendships, hobbies, some of those other kind of things. So healthy couples understand the healthy balance between dependence and independence, called interdependence. We depend on each other for some things, and we are also independent and have our own identity in some areas, and that provides a healthy relationship inside the marriage. So those are 5 habits that I have discovered over the last decade or so that seem to be present with couples who are successful and healthy and thriving and enjoying their relationships. So here's your homework. I need you to rank your marriage right now, 1 to 5 in each of these 5 areas, and then have a chat with your spouse. Wherever there may be your greatest need or area for growth, choose one thing you can do to strengthen that area and focus on it, work on it, evaluate it weekly with each other, have conversations around it, and just slowly go through these 5 until you get to a place where you feel like these 5 things have become habits in your relationship. And if you do that, I promise you will have the relationship you ultimately desire. Again, if you haven't downloaded the free guide to intimacy, grab that. If you need help with communication, join me for one of my live masterclasses. You'll see a link below to sign up for that as well. And I'll see you right back here on the next video. Bye for now.